Hello and welcome back to Learn Linux TV, and also welcome back to my Linux Crash Course series, which now has over 70 episodes in this series. But the cool thing about it is that for the most part, you could watch these episodes in any order. So you could digest the ones for the things that you want to learn about. And who knows, maybe you'll want to consume all of them because there's a lot of Linux-related learning goodness in that series. And this time around, what I'm going to do is talk to you guys about the dig command. This is one of two commands that I'm going to cover in this series at least that cover how to fetch DNS queries, A records, text records, mail exchange records, and things like that. And what I'm going to do in this video is teach you everything that you'll need to know in order to use it. And I can't wait to dive into the dig command, so why don't we get started right now? Before we get into the examples, I wanted to take a moment and mention some important things about the dig command. As I mentioned during the intro, you can use the dig command to query DNS information. For example, if you wanted to find the IP address of a web server, you can do that. You could also look up information on subdomains, text records, and so on. If you're familiar with DNS in general, then you're probably familiar with those terms, but even if not, I'll give you some general information to help you as we go along. More importantly, another thing to know about the dig command is that it's not the only tool you could use for DNS records. The DNS Lookup command also exists for the exact same purpose. Now, I'm going to cover the DNS Lookup command in another video if I haven't already done so. For that reason, I won't mention much about how it works in this video. That said, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because there's a bit of misinformation online about these commands that I'd like to clear up. The thing is, the dig command is considered to be a successor to the DNS Lookup command, and many blogs online will mention that you should use the dig command and stop using DNS Lookup. However, the truth is, though, the dig command is no longer considered to be a successor to DNS Lookup. That decision was later reversed. That means that the dig and DNS Lookup commands are both considered to be tools that are acceptable to use. So why would you want to use one over the other? Well, the two tools behave a bit differently, and in some situations, one might work better than the other. The reason for this is because the dig command, which I'll be covering today, uses your operating system libraries for DNS Lookup. The DNS Lookup command, on the other hand, doesn't. This is why the behavior of one might be different than the other, even when looking up the same information. For that reason, I recommend that you learn the basics of both the dig command and DNS Lookup. I'll definitely cover the DNS Lookup command at some point in this series, and depending on when you're watching this, it might already be out. Anyway, what I'll do now is jump into my terminal and I'll show you how to use the dig command. Alright, so let's see some examples. The first thing we're going to do is find out if we have the dig command available. You could type command-v and then dig, just like that, to find out. If for some reason you don't see output when you run this command, that means that the dig command is not available. What I'll do right now is overlay some commands on the screen for various distributions, and you could use one of those commands, whichever one is for your distro, to get this installed. Once you do that, you should be able to use it. Now, the dig command is very, very simple, so what I'm going to do is give you some useful examples that you could write down or keep in your notes that you could use during your career. The most basic example that I could give you when it comes to basic usage is just simply typing dig, and then what you do is type a domain. So I'll use my domain as an example here, learnlinux.tv. Let's see what happens. So as you can see right here, we have quite a bit of information regarding my domain right here. We can see the address record, which gives us the IP address of my website. We also see the TTL, or time to live. That lets us know just how long the record is going to be cached until clients need to, fetch it again. And there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to go over all of it. But what I am going to do is give you some useful options, and the first one was very simple. Now, another thing I want to point out here is that you also get the query time. So right now, you can see that the query time was 76 milliseconds. That's pretty good. You definitely want to make sure you have a low number for the response time, otherwise that could cause a massive amount of slowdown on your network. Now, similarly, if you wanted to look up a subdomain, you could do that as well. On my website, I have a subdomain, community.learnlinux.tv, so I'm going to use that as an example. In some cases, you might have more than one website on a single server, so it's possible that you could have the same IP address for a domain and a subdomain. In my case, though, my community site is on a different server altogether. So when I press enter, what we're going to see here is a different IP address for this service, and that's exactly what we see. So the takeaway for this section of the video is if you want to find address records, that's what we're looking up right now, using the dig command, you simply type dig followed by the domain. If you want to inspect a subdomain, well, you could do that as well. Whether it's a subdomain or a normal domain, it doesn't matter. You just type dig and then the domain, and that's all there is to it. Now, another thing you could do with the dig command is look up other kinds of records. So again, I'll use my domain as an example for this. And what I'm going to do right now is inspect the mail exchange record. So if your server handles email at all, then you probably have an MX record. This is specific to mail exchange, hence the name. So what I'm going to do is press enter and let's see what happens. We can see that we have quite a bit of information here. In my case, I don't actually have a mail server on this server, but the DNS information does need to include it for the provider that I'm actually using, which is why I have so much right here when it comes to mail exchange. Basically, if you're setting up a mail server or if you're hooking a mail service to your domain, then in that case, you're going to need to do something like this, set up some mail exchange records to facilitate that. But that's not something for me to walk you through. Generally, what it takes is the provider to walk you through it because they all require something different. So if this is something that you'll need, then the provider will provide you with everything that needs to go here. But if you wanted to check your mail exchange records, well, you just saw an example of how to do that. I'll bring it up again. All I did was type MX after the URL right there, as you can see, and that's how I was able to fetch that information. Now, similarly, we can also find other types of information as well. For example, text records. Text records are common when you are setting up a service. When you want to approve or validate that you own a domain, then often you'll be told to create a text record. Now, often that could be deleted after the validation has been completed. Sometimes you might have some text records that'll stick around longer. So for example, here I have an SPF record. That's actually beyond the scope of this video. It's a text record, but it's a type of text record that's used to validate email. Again, it's outside the scope of this video, but what I wanted to do is show you how to look up text records with the dig command, and that's exactly what we've done. Now continuing, what I'll do is bring that back up again, and let's see an example of another record type. We saw address records, MX records, text records. Now what we're going to do is look up the name server for the domain, so I'll press enter here. And as you can see, the DNS here for my domain is hosted by Linode. We can see Linode mentioned there several times actually. It's not uncommon to have several name servers. If one goes down, you have the others. And that kind of redundancy is common. There's 5 of them here, so there's, more than a few. So that way, if one of those servers goes down, I'm still covered. But as you can see here, we have the name server information for my website, which is pretty cool. Sorry to interrupt my own video, but I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate each and every single one of you, and I love creating Linux-related content for you guys. But unfortunately, producing high-quality Linux content like this isn't cheap. But if you want to help me make even more content for you guys, then consider supporting Learn Linux TV. And a great way to do that is to check out the official shop for Learn Linux TV, which was just recently updated. Inside the shop, you'll find distro-themed shirts, bags, drinkware, and more. And there's some other surprises there as well. For example, I've just introduced a mousepad that doubles as a Tmux cheat sheet. How cool is that? So check out the shop at merch.learnlinux.tv, or you could check out the merch shelf right here on YouTube. You could get yourself something really cool and support Linux learning at the same time, so it's a win-win. Anyway, thank you guys so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, another trick I want to show you is how to use a specific DNS server for your lookups. What I'll do is type dig just like before, but this time I'm going to type @ and then I'm going to type the IP address of a name server that I want to use for this request. I'm just going to use Google's public DNS. If you have your own DNS server, you can certainly put that IP address right here. And then you simply type a domain again. I'll type learnlinux.tv. And I should get the same IP address. It's just using a different DNS server for the lookup. And this could be useful if you have local DNS issues, or if you want to test DNS caching, you want to check response times and things like that of a specific DNS server. That could be very useful. And often nowadays, an operating system will usually have a local DNS resolver. So your lookups are actually having happening locally. So with this command right here, we're able to say, no, we just want to see the information from a different name server, and we can simply type the IP address right here, as you just saw me do, with the @ symbol, and that'll point our request at a different server. Now, as you just saw, when we type dig and then we give it a domain, you can see that there's quite a bit of information here. And if you want to consolidate that or, trim that down, here's a tip. We could type dig and then plus short, just like that, along with a domain like we did before, just adding plus short there in the middle. I'll press enter, and we see the address record of that particular website, and we don't see much else. Actually, we see nothing else. We just see the IP address. So if you wanted to use the dig command in a script, for example, that's why the short option exists. So that way it, truncates most of the information and strips it down to just what you need. So if we're looking up an address record, for example, then we have the IP address here. And if that's all you wanted to know, or you needed to include that in a script for some reason, then you might want to use the short option to accomplish that. Next, what I'm going to do is give you another option. So what I'll do is remove short, and I'm going to change that to TTL. That stands for time to live. Essentially, when you have a DNS record, there's going to be a TTL number associated with it, which is how long that particular record should stay cached until your local client has to go and fetch it again. This is great for performance. I mean, you can imagine having a website, and if everyone was, constantly accessing it and had to do a DNS lookup every time, then your DNS server would be very busy. But it's not uncommon to set a time to live of 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, something like that. So if you're going to that website again and it hasn't yet been 2 hours since the last time you went there, then your local client will just use the cached information. And what that does is saves the target DNS server from having to do a lot of lookups, for example. Everyone's looking up every 2 hours rather than every minute, for example. That could be a lot better. Sometimes the time to live is a strategic value when you want to do a lift and shift and transfer a website from one provider to another. It's not uncommon to lower this down to like 5 minutes. So everyone's DNS cache times out. And then when it comes up on the new provider or host, then you're going to have everyone get back to it that much faster. It's beyond the scope of this video, but it is something that you'll need to look up every now and then. And if I press enter, you'll see the information right here. What you're looking for is the 3600 right there. That's in terms of seconds. So that's how long a time has to pass before the cache expires when you're caching responses locally. Again, that's beyond the scope of this video, but this is something that you will need every now and then. And the time to live is one of those things that is going to come up again and again. Sometimes you have to lower it, you have to increase it, and it also gets into performance tuning. But if you wanted to learn what your TTL value currently is for a DNS record, well, that's how you look it up. Of course, there's other options that you could use with this command, but I wanted to give you the most common ones, and that's exactly what I've done. In this video, I went over some basics of the dig command, and you saw how to look up address records, MX records, and things like that, and I hope it was helpful. And there's our video. In this video, I covered the dig command, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, then please click that like button to let YouTube know that you enjoyed this video, because who knows, if you do that, we might see more Linux-related goodness here on YouTube. Anyway, thank you guys so much yet again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.